everyone, and thank you for joining us here on the Recruitment Roundup podcast, which is brought to you by BMS Performance. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, BMS Performance is a specialist sales and marketing recruitment consultancy. For the last 30 years, we've been helping businesses across the UK recruit for vacancies at every level. I'm your host, Mike Leather. We'll get stuck into the latest trends in regards to recruitment. We'll talk about insights, we share ideas, we share experiences, and ultimately we look to provide value to fundamentally help you, whether or not you're a hiring manager, a business leader, or part of an internal talent team, to recruit smarter, faster, and more effectively. I'm joined again by my colleague Sam. How you doing, Sam?
I'm all good, Mike. All good. How's everything with you?
All right, all good. Excited for another conversation where we're going to be talking about the 4 blockers, what we're seeing at the moment, that are preventing companies from recruiting for the sales vacancies. And it's a tricky time of year, isn't it, this time of year? Companies have got a lot of pressure to hit targets, Christmas parties coming up. So it is a tough time to recruit, but there's certain things that we're seeing at the moment in the market that are preventing companies from recruiting that we wanted to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. Really looking forward to discussing this one. And yeah, like I said, it's a busy time for companies, year-end, Christmas parties. So there's a lot going on. But yeah, it's been a few prevalent themes starting to pop up at this time.
Yeah, I think before we get into it, we wanted to give a bit of a precursor to what we're seeing in the sales recruitment market at the moment. I think you would agree with this, Sam. Hopefully you will, that we've definitely seen a shift from the market being uber candidate driven to one that is now more balanced from a candidate and employer driven landscape. I'm managing a process at the moment, and we've got 5 candidates in at a second interview. They've all got other opportunities in there, but not as many as what they had, as what you'd expect candidates to have had 5-6 months ago. I think one of the things that we're also seeing as well is a slowdown in salary increases. Again, if I look back 6-7 months, what we were seeing as candidates being super ambitious when they come into the market looking for 10-15% increases. We're actually seeing some candidates now moving for the same or slightly less. So there has been a shift, but candidates do still have choice, and it's still as hard as it was to find really good caliber salespeople across every sector and every location, I would suggest, in the UK. Anything you'd add on that, Sam? What you're seeing out there?
100% agree. I think obviously going back to what it was at the start of the year, where we speaking to a candidate and it was those 2 things, right? It was that salary expectation, wanting a 10-20% rise, and then also just the market just being so heavily candidate led, you would never speak to someone who was interviewing with just usually one business, who usually be 3, sometimes even 5, 6 different opportunities, and it made it so difficult sometimes to manage these processes, because the market was extremely candidate led. But we are seeing things sort of go into a more sort of normalized market.
Yeah, I think that's a good term to use.
Yeah. So but yeah, no, it's definitely an interesting time in the year.
Yeah, there's still a large appetite from companies to recruit. If we look at the job flow, obviously it was slightly decreased in the summer, but right now it's pretty stable, versus 2022. I would say it's we're looking at similar volumes of jobs out there, so there's still a decent appetite to recruit from companies. But yeah, I thought it was a good way to kick it off, because it leads in nicely to what we're going to talk about. And the first point, and unfortunately you've been at the behest of this recently, is long notice periods. So I'll let you lead on that one.
I suppose I'm starting to see this quite a lot, and usually it's one of those, if you're dealing in certain instances, there's certain times that you obviously ultimately can't change it, but notice periods ultimately increase and delay that time to onboard, and recruit that prevalent talent. We're starting to see, 3-month notice periods really kick in, and
more regular, isn't it? 3-month notice periods, especially in the medical devices world.
100% in the medical devices world. Depending on what someone sold, especially capital equipment reps, it's usually that way inclined. It ties in with someone's bonus as well, so that 3-month notice period. You understand it a bit bit more, in the medical devices world if it's a nurse, and there's certain things, but we're definitely seeing these, notice periods, really, really creep in, and it's hampering, a company's ability to successfully onboard talent in a quick amount of time, because ultimately that's what companies want to do. Notice periods aren't an ideal thing for anyone, really.
Yeah, 100%. With regards to notice periods hampering a company's ability to onboard people, do you want to give a bit more sort of detail around like what issues you've seen on that front?
Yeah, I think obviously there's a few different examples that I can think back to, obviously right now, and obviously going back a few months. But ultimately, when depending on the interview process, if we're talking a first stage interview, that will probably take, depending on the company, a week to sort of turn around, and then allowing another sort of week or so for the second stage interview. When we're looking at someone who's potentially got a 3-month notice period, we're looking at, another, from the time that you initially start conversating with this person, maybe 4 or 5 months before they actually walk into your business and start adding value and, start positively impacting, the team and the numbers. So, definitely seeing it creep up, quite a lot more. And yeah, ultimately it's all about, maybe being a bit more proactive in creating processes that streamline that, because when people do tend to have these notices, there's a couple of negatives that come with it, rightly or wrongly. It's just the way it works. Either people keep on getting approached by
You do.
different
Yeah.
companies,
Until they're through your door
yeah,
and they've started with you, then they are still, theoretically on the market. And that,
exactly.
might be quite hard for some people to hear, but
Yeah.
it is,
Yeah.
the reality. I would say that a vast amount of candidates, once they've signed a contract,
Yeah.
they're bought in. But unfortunately, there are candidates that do continue to get approached, and look, people just get sold the dream, don't they? If they're being approached by a role that's offering 10, 15, 20 grand more on the basic salary, then what would you do? Would you talk to that company? You might do, even if you've signed a contract.
Yeah.
It's I think the 1 month notice periods are easier to manage. I think where we're seeing companies lose out is 3 months, isn't it? And that's where a big challenge has been. And we've discussed this on other podcasts, but it's worthwhile refreshing on it. What sort of advice are you giving to some of your clients and as to how they can mitigate these risks?
Yeah. Ultimately, it's all about being proactive in our approach. And I think if someone's got a really long notice period at the start, it's all about, I suppose, creating a framework within that time of increasing touch points, and ultimately, knowing fully well for that candidate to know what's to be expected as and when they hand in their notice and before they actually join your business. So it's all about keeping the candidate positively engaged consistently and throughout, so that they know what to expect. Because believe it or not, sometimes companies can drop the ball here and think that they've got the offer letter out, they've got the contract out, and the person doesn't hear from the business until like a 2 days before they start. Are you joining us on Monday? That's not good enough really in this market to stand out. So it's all about ultimately being proactive and creating that onboarding plan from the day one. Once we've got that offer accepted, creating a timeline of events. So right, said candidate, the next plan is, we're going to look to, do this. The offer letter will be with you on such a date. We will then look to have a feedback call on the back of receiving that. The contract letter will then be with you on such a date. And then we will, start, sending you some information, stuff like that. Just creating different meetings and increasing the touch points, because 3 months is a long time. And, in some instances, some people might ultimately lose interest, right? Because that can happen as well. So I think that, that the advice that I'd be giving, that I've been giving to my clients that I work with, it's all about creating a framework and increasing touch points, getting those people to feel part of the business, part of the organization, as and when they've ultimately accepted this job, from month 1 until sort of month 3 when they join.
Yeah, and what the employer's doing there is the testing commitment every way.
Yeah,
process, aren't they? Which is
yeah,
absolutely key. You've got to keep testing
yeah,
commitment until the person starts with it. And at any point, the candidate doesn't
yeah.
return a call, there could be a
So
good reason,
yeah,
but if they
yeah.
don't come back to you and it's over an extended period of time, then you
Yeah,
might have an issue.
you might have an issue.
There's other things that you can be doing as well. You can be giving the candidate information that they can read through and look through before they
Yeah,
start again. These are all
yeah,
things that you can do to keep the candidate engaged. The other thing to say on this, just before we move on to the second point, is don't take the notice period as gospel,
yeah,
because oftentimes we'll hear, oh, candidates on a 3-month notice period and think we can't do anything about it. Actually can, especially at this time of year. Companies at this time of year are more open than at any other point to being flexible on notice periods. December, for a lot of companies, certainly those last 2 weeks can afford them some downtime. Christmas parties are happening. The markets might slow down if they're certainly seasonal, and Christmas is a quieter time. So companies, as a result, are more open to
yeah,
people leaving and starting with new employers sooner. So it's something to think about. Notice periods can be negotiated. They're
yeah,
not always set in stone. And part of what, again, advice I give to employers is to brief the candidate
yeah,
on it before. If you know they're going to go and resign, have a chat with them about how do you think that'll go?
yeah,
What do you think their response might be? How do you think they'll feel about
yeah.
reducing a notice period if needed?
Exactly. Yeah,
And just having that conversation with them. But cool. And the second point, and we see this, don't we,
yeah,
every year. I've been in recruitment now for a decade, and at BMS for a decade, and I've seen it every year. Companies will start the process before Christmas. They will offer someone, get the contract signed. Even now, we've seen it already. But they'll say, "Oh, we've just got no time to get them in
yeah,
before Christmas. It just doesn't work for us. We can't get them started until January." And there's just a lack of urgency, isn't there?
yeah.
To get people in, and that again has the potential impact of maybe losing someone as a result of that decision. What's your thoughts on that? How much have you seen that lately?
It's usually this time of the year. Companies ultimately, I don't know whether maybe recruitment might sort of fall down the pecking order from a sort of priority time, but also people just don't have the time. And when that sort of lack of urgency or to get someone started until the new year, again, we've spoken about notice periods earlier on there, it's just mitigating that risk, and that puts ourselves in such a challenging position. If I'm said company looking to get the top talent to come through my door and not starting someone in until that new year, can really cause a negative impact over a couple of different points really. So yeah, I'm definitely seeing it quite a bit.
Yeah. What are some of the companies then that you've recruited for? And I can give my take on this as well. But
Yeah,
what outside of the box thinking are they doing, I guess, to get people in and onboarded this side of Christmas? And this could be good advice for people that are listening to this who perhaps thinking logistically we can't make it work, but maybe they'll hear something that we say now that they think, oh yeah, we didn't quite think of that. That could help.
yeah. I think ultimately what the companies that are doing, that are thinking proactively and really understand, because it's all about putting yourself in a less competitive scenario, right? Because the beauty of looking to get someone in right now is that, the market's probably less active. We spoke about, the market sort of evening out in terms of candidates having potentially less opportunities to be able to go to. The last thing that you want is to be delaying that time. So, the companies that I'm working with, the top, medical equipment sort of manufacturers is, okay, ideally, we probably would prefer to potentially get this person in the new year. However, what we want to do is maybe get them onboarded, sort of getting them training materials. That
Yeah,
could be
yeah,
as simple as getting people set up on the system, learning a bit more about the products. And all these things are little things that a company can do.
yeah,
And you are then putting yourself in a position where in the new year, we're not then doing all the training and all that kind of stuff. We've then got a fully motivated, fully engaged sales team that's just ready to hit the ground running.
yeah,
That's just
yeah,
ready
yeah.
to start building relationships with your, with your customers, right? And if someone's got that notice period again, So the key thing is to get it done as
Mm.
as quickly as possible. And the top companies are being proactive, even if it's like getting that information over to the candidates to get them started, so they can start adding value right away.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think what they do is they'll make an exception,
Yeah,
don't they?
yeah,
They'll say, right, this is how we'd usually do it, but we'll make an exception. Maybe the induction's face to face, so instead what we'll do is we'll
yeah,
do it virtually,
yeah,
because certain people that would usually be involved in a face to face induction are off, or they're not here, or they're
yeah,
engaged because it's the end of the year. So we'll change it up and we'll do part of it virtually, get get those real foundations laid, so that, as you said, coming
yeah,
in the new year, they're then ready to hit the ground running and they can finish off
yeah,
some of their induction training. But the important thing is that candidate that you've worked really, really hard to attract
yeah,
and assess throughout your process, that you've got bought into you, you started this side of Christmas, therefore less likely to lose that candidate to another opportunity. I think another point that slightly segues on this is, again, companies being reluctant to even start the process this
yeah,
side of Christmas. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's one of those where we've definitely got a need to recruit. We're keen to recruit, but we're going to wait until the new year. And again, we've spoken about the competitive landscape that we are in. That it's more of a misconception that recruitment and hiring slows down at this time. If I'm a company and if I want to increase the chances of me securing the top talent, surely I want to be operating in a less active market to increase the
Mm,
odds of me getting the best person through the door, right?
yeah.
So I completely agree with that, Mike. It's all about, setting something that, getting going quick so that we don't ultimately miss out.
Yeah, I think the companies that we work with that'll
Yeah,
start the process before Christmas, what they're
yeah,
generally thinking about is, when do we need this person contributing by, and
yeah,
working backwards from that.
yeah,
If we don't need this person contributing until April,
yeah,
and ordinarily it takes us 2 months to get something up and running, then you probably can start the process in January.
yeah,
But if you need someone contributing in February, then you probably need to get someone in
yeah,
December, go through some induction training, and then they can get out on the road, or on the phone, or whatever, whatever duties are involved with the role, to build pipeline, get that going
yeah,
in January. So it's about thinking in that sense, rather than we're just tight
yeah,
on time at the moment, so we're not going to be able to get it done. Then going back to your point, it's then assessing how big of a priority is
yeah,
recruitment for me at the moment. We wanted to talk about candidate experience, didn't we? We've spoken about this loads on other
yeah,
podcasts. I think definitely at this time of year, we tend to see it, which worsen's the right word, but
yeah,
not have as much focus perhaps as it might at other times. There's some examples for this that I'm sure you can share. Some I've got some examples that I can share on the flip side of it. Companies that are doing
yeah,
really well at the moment from a
yeah,
candidate experience point,
yeah.
but yeah,
I'll probably, yeah, it's a really, really good point, Mike. It's something that's quite personal to me, because the candidate experience is all about the personal brand and the perception of
yeah,
the company to the candidate as and when they engage with them. And I think people tend to forget that ultimately, although we are the company and we're interviewing this candidate, on the other end, on the flip side, the candidate is interviewing us. And when those things aren't quite aligned, the personal brand doesn't go well, the candidate doesn't have a positive experience, and ultimately companies end up missing out on potentially some really, really top talent. And speaking about examples, I've probably got a negative example regarding
how not to
an
do it.
interview, how
Yeah,
not to do it, perhaps.
yeah,
For a candidate that I was dealing with within the aesthetic market, they had a first stage interview. This is going back quite a few sort of weeks ago, and essentially what happened within that interview process, a candidate sort of came through that really ticked a lot of the boxes that they were looking for. But within that interview process, it became apparent following the feedback of the candidate that the interview just was not enjoyable. It was not, a pleasant kind of experience. There was no sort of back and forth within the interview, and it was just, probably an interview that wasn't done well. The candidate couldn't flourish. They couldn't get a real feel and a real taste for the organization. And then ultimately, the candidate ended up, withdrawing from the interview process, right? And on the flip
so what
side,
was the reason the candidate gave as to why they withdrew?
yeah, well, the candidate ultimately felt like, look, the company just isn't right. Like, I just can't see myself working with, these people. And it was a real shame, really, because they just felt like, look, in my experience, this is not the kind of business that I want to be part of. I don't feel like I've been, treated in a way where I could see myself working well within the team. And and that was the ultimate reason, really. So, from on the other end, the company they actually felt like the interview went quite well. They felt like the candidate answered all the questions really well.
Really?
They didn't miss a beat, didn't miss a trick. But, I doing the feedback and catching up with both the candidate and company, the perception leaving, it was like, two completely different sort of conversations that were not aligned. And ultimately the candidate, withdrew from that process. The company missed out on real top talent, because the candidate was really good. But yeah, due to a negative sort of experience, the company
What
ultimately ended up missing out.
what could the company have done then to
Yeah.
enhance that experience and make it better?
Yeah, I think within any interview process, it's all about, I personally believe, creating an interview which can get the best out of the candidate and
Yeah,
ultimately
yeah.
get the best out of the company. So it's within the questions that we're asking, but also how we're asking these questions, not just coming across as maybe we're just reading questions off a list, right? Really getting to understand the grips of said salesperson, really understanding what their sales process is, but how that sales process is, showing genuine intrigue, interest, asking follow-up questions on the back of the answers that you're given, not like, sort of being monotone and being direct and sort of reading questions off a list and then not allowing that ability to build that rapport
Not
and
very
that
human, is
empathy,
it?
not very human,
Yeah, yeah,
very,
yeah.
very AI.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so I think if I'm a company, those are the things that I would be, looking to, and that's what I think ultimately they probably should have done in hindsight, and
Yeah.
it would have definitely ended up different, I imagine.
Yeah, so it sounds like what's
Yeah,
happened there is the candidate's just come away and just not
yeah,
been brought in. I mean, candidate
yeah,
experience is such a broad topic, isn't it? What we're talking about here is
yeah,
the candidate experience when they've got in the interview.
yeah,
I've got an example to share.
yeah,
It's the complete opposite, where
yeah,
candidates have come out of a process I've been looking after recently, and they've said, "Oh, it's the best interviews I've ever had.
yeah,
It's been an amazing experience." And how that one worked, it's a company that we're recruiting a national account manager role for. They operate in the
yeah,
financial services industry sector.
yeah,
Um, and at the start of the process, we had first interview date, second interview date. The client trusted us to put forward our best candidates that fit the brief. So, moving away from the CV, it
yeah,
was a trust assessment of the individuals that you'll put forward. So we were able to book our best cohort of candidates in there. The interviews themselves were all done over Teams, and they lasted about 45 minutes. Competency-based style interview, but they were given a real insight from the hiring manager of her team, her ethos,
yeah,
the culture. Um,
absolutely.
and whilst the interview was competency based, it was a very flowing conversation style of interview, very back and forth. And they came out of that and really enjoyed it. And we've got second interviews happening next week, of which they're all travelling to London to. So, that tells you in itself how bought in they are to the process. And that's just an example of having
Yeah,
first, second interview dates locked in and creating a process. It is one challenging, but also enjoyable, which we speak
yeah,
about a lot, don't we? And off the back of that, again, what I will say is the second interview brief is really clear, really well defined. This is something that I think we see a lot as well, and I don't want to pigeonhole corporate companies or large businesses, but I think at times they can be a bit vague in some of the interview briefs that they send out. One of my friends is on the market at the moment, and he's interviewing with quite a lot of large blue chip companies, and the candidate experience just hasn't been great. He's
yeah,
a lot of the time he's receiving interview briefs and they're very vague, not much
yeah,
detail. He's then asking questions of what is expected specifically and not hearing back for 2 to 3 days. And, that's dampening his candidate experience. So,
yeah,
making sure the interview is engaging, informative, and challenging, but also communication with the candidates is totally key, and it's ever more so at this time of year, because plenty of companies are recruiting. There's a lot of competition out there, and as we said earlier, candidate volumes are still, caliber candidate volumes are still relatively low. Yeah. So Sam, point 4, we wanted to talk about CVs and turning around times on them, because we're definitely seeing a bit of an extension, should we say, at the moment, and that is 100% impacting time to hires of clients that we're working with, and no doubt companies have experienced this directly. And I do empathise. On one hand, it's a busy time of year, as we've said throughout this podcast. Hiring managers, decision makers are trying to close as much as they can this side of Christmas. They've got a lot on, but we're seeing a real impact, aren't we, in companies' ability to access top tier talent because of a slowdown in turning around CVs to say, yes, I want to see this person, no doubt.
Michael, we're definitely seeing this creep in a bit more. It's completely understand from a company perspective that it's a busy time, like you said, but the past sort of 2, 3, 4 months, really, that feedback on CVs. Do you want to see someone, equally throughout the feedback within the process? It's something that is delaying, and it's ultimately causing these companies to miss out on top talent before the competitors are swooping in, due to being, a bit more proactive within their recruitment process, shall we say.
What would you say at the moment is the average lifespan of a candidate?
That's a great question. I would say, if I was to 3 weeks, 3, 4 weeks.
Would agree. Yeah. 2 to 4 weeks. I would say. Yeah. And generally, a candidate will have their own opportunities in process that they'll be approaching directly. They'll be being approached by companies directly as well on LinkedIn, plus maybe working with 1, 2, hopefully no more than 2, 3 recruiters at a max, but they'll have a lot, as we say, going on. So getting back to them as quickly as I can is important in any market, but why is it so important right now, would you say, in turning CVs around quickly?
Yeah, well, it sort of boils down, it touches base with all the kinds of things that we speak about earlier, right? In terms of, we've spoken about the candidate experience, we've spoken about candidate engagement, but we've also spoken about, notice periods and time. All of these things, it's so critical right now to be able to come back to these candidates so that you could get them through your doors in the quickest amount of time. So we are still seeing quite a lot of companies actively within the market, and it's all about increasing those odds for you as a company to be successful, to get that top talent to walk through your doors. And the longer you take, ultimately, it's all about, increasing that risk that, sadly miss out, for that top person that would ultimately be making a difference in your business. So due to the market conditions, due to the competitive space that we are operating in, it's so important now, especially now more than ever, to come back to these candidates, come back to these recruiters in a quick amount of time.
Yeah, I think over the next, I agree with all that. I think to add some context on it as well, though, for this time of year, over these next sort of two weeks, we've got 2 weeks left of November, then we're into December. Candidates will want to get their job search wrapped up, like 100%. They want to get the job search wrapped up. They want to be offered, accepted, resigned, working through the notice, so that they can relax.
Look forward to a new job in the
Christmas, new year. Exactly. And it's a hot time right now. So this is why we're emphasising this so much. What in your opinion does good look like? Because there'll be companies that are there thinking, we try to come back on CVs as quickly as we can, but it's not always possible. Like, we get that, don't we?
Yeah.
But what does good look like in terms of turning around a CV, would you say?
Yeah, I think good looks like certainly no later than 48 hours. I think that, I feel, is an achievable sort of goal. 24 hours is great, right? That's within sort of the next day or so. But I think anything within a couple of days, I think is achievable. But ultimately, sometimes, these things end up being, days and weeks on end. So I think, feedback on a CV, feedback on an interview within a 48-hour window, I think, definitely classes as good in my opinion.
Yeah. I would say so too, but I think this is if you are a company that's working with recruitment partners, this is a good SLA to set at the start of that partnership to say, right, when you send me a CV, we will agree to feedback on it in X period of time, but also then commit the recruitment partner as well, so that when candidates had an interview, they must give you feedback after the interview within 24 hours. Recruitment partners, aren't angels in it either. That does. I'm sure there's companies that will have frustrations with recruitment partners, believe they're slow in sending CVs in the first place. So it does go on both sides. But I think certainly from what we're seeing, speed and turnaround CVs, especially over these next 2-3 weeks, is going to be key to recruiting and filling your vacancies this side of Christmas. Yeah, so that's it for this episode. Sam, is anything else you wanted to cover off just before we wrap up?
No, Mike, I think that was a really, really good conversation. Really enjoyed looking at the different points that we spoke about. We went through quite a lot there. So fantastic. I really enjoyed that.
Yes. Okay, yeah, great. Thanks, Sam. Really enjoyed that, and I look forward to seeing everyone next week.
Cheers, Mike. Have a good one. See you next week.
There you go. Cheers. Bye.